Welcome to Saints in the Parish. This is Father Steve Williams. Would you like to grow deeper in your Catholic faith? Join us each week as we reflect on one particular aspect of Catholic teaching and spiritual life. Father Steve Williams here. This is a beautiful day, and we begin our podcast, Saints in the Parish. So what a wonderful opportunity it is to come into your home once a week with a different reflection for those that are in the pews. I have with me my co-host,
Donald Paul, and it's great to be with you on this first episode. So if you haven't listened to the introduction, do that first. It'll be posted right before this one. It'll give kind of a background, what this is about, why we chose the name, all that kind of stuff. So stop what you're doing, go view that first, and then come back and join us for this first episode.
Hoping that you'll learn a lot. That's really our desire, is to engage you, but also hoping that you'll grow a little deeper, learn a lot, and then maybe share with many other people. So we think about the modern technology, and we think about social media, and we think about an opportunity for us to use this for evangelization, to use it to help people to grow in their faith life. And that's the reason why we offering this podcast. We'll hopefully do a series throughout this year, so for about a year, and then we'll see where it goes from there. And so you might ask the question, what would be the very first topic that we would choose for our first podcast? Well, it's going to be how to evangelize the younger generations. And your next question is, well, why? Well, Donald Paul asked me, he said, well, what's the subject that the most people come and talk to you about as a priest? What would be the subject that a lot of people have a lot of questions about? Well, barring none, the number one, number two is not even close, is they want some help with their children or their grandchildren as it pertains to the faith and going to church, questions about the faith. Can I talk to their children? Can I talk to their grandchildren? Their grandchildren have some questions, or they've just quit going to church. And so we thought that this would be a great first topic, how to help evangelize the younger generations. And I learned a lot. I learned what different generations are.
Yeah, I had to look it up because I didn't even know what generation I was. So I had to Google it. And this is just, I'm going to read it to you because I didn't know this. So we have the baby boomers, which everybody knows, which would be kind of 1946 to 1964. We have Gen X, which is 65 to 79 about. Gen Y, which is the 80s to about 94. We have Gen Z, which is kind of what everybody is hearing about right now, which is 95 to 2009, which would be my generation. And then we have Gen Alpha, which I had never even heard of. And that is this current generation that we're in, which is about 2010 to, right now and continuing.
And I didn't know this either, but they're hoping that if that all catches on, they're hoping like next year in 2025 would be beta generation. So they're hoping that they can go alpha, beta, gamma generations. That's their hope, and to be able to name all those generations. So it was easy for us to look that up and to give you those generations, so you understand when we talk about the millennials, those would be the X, and the Y would be the younger generations. And so I'm extremely passionate about our younger generations, as I am with all of the faithful, but particularly helping them to be well-formed. Two of the words that Donald Paul and I use often will be a duty. So we have a certain duty because of our baptismal call to want to help evangelize, to want to help to, transfer the faith to the next generation and the next generation. And the other word that you'll hear a lot of us talk about is the way it ought to be. We use the word ought a lot. I like that word because sometimes we feel like it, sometimes we don't feel like it. Okay, what ought you to be doing? And so that will help kind of give us some parameters of what we're talking about this morning as we talk about the new evangelization. Of course, we have lots of church history, lots of church documents talking about the new evangelization.
Yeah. So Father Steve, going back to the 60s, we have all of the popes. So St. Paul VI, you have John Paul I in his short time, John Paul II, Pope Benedict, and now Pope Francis. And all of them talk about the new evangelization. So just kind of
and even before Paul VI, John the 23rd, who opened the Vatican II conference, and Paul VI closed it, and they wrote a lot about the new evangelization.
So what is the new evangelization?
Well, I'm sure that if you ask several different theologians, you would get several different opinions on what the new evangelization is. More practical, more theological. I mean, and they're all right, and they're all right. The bottom line with the new evangelization is, we want to make the faith relevant for people, all people, and particularly, again, young people. We want to make the faith relevant. If you hear some people talking about the Catholic Church, they'll talk about the Catholic Church in terms of it, not changing, in terms of it, being too strict. Well, although that might be true a little, it's not. It's true because of love. It's true because of care. It's true because of concern. It's true because we want to have rules, regulations, even God's commandments to follow so that we can know where we're going. How many people want to travel down a road with no signs at all? You don't know whether you're on the right road or not. I mean, you think about this. You're on a journey and you're traveling down the road, and I think about myself on the Camino a couple of years ago. I was so excited every time I would see a sign letting me know that I'm on the right road, because you're just out in the middle of the country, you're traveling, you're walking, and it's so exciting. And so that's what the church does for us. The church affirms us and says, you're doing good, coming to church, participating in Mass. You're doing good by getting involved in youth ministry, getting involved in a prayer group, getting involved in a Bible study, getting involved in a retreat. Think of the opportunities that we have in the church. And so that's the new evangelization. The more you have, the more you can give.
Right. Yeah, and I think when I think about the new evangelization, it's, if you go back, towards, even the last millennium or the one before, especially in Europe, a lot of Europe was Catholic. I mean, I would say a majority of Europe is Catholic. We have France, who is like the eldest daughter of the church. You have all these deeply Catholic roots, and now you don't see that, right? We were moving towards, we would call secularization. So really a disregarding of God in our culture. And the new evangelization is really, yes, we want to evangelize, those that have never heard Christ, those that don't know who the church is, but it's also, let's re-evangelize like ourselves. Let's re-evangelize those that have been baptized, those that have maybe don't know the faith as well as they should, or maybe have fallen away from the faith. So it's almost a repurposing and a
rediscovering,
of the faith for those. Maybe they're in the pews already and they are kind of waning, or maybe, they don't really know what they're, why they're coming to Mass often. And it's an opportunity for us to represent the faith in not necessarily a new way, because the faith is what Christ gave us, but in maybe a more practical way for them to be able to hear it in a more, in just a new and a fresh way for them,
How many times have you heard someone say to you, I don't really get anything out of Mass?
Mm-hmm. All the time.
Okay. And so you know what I answer to that? I say, okay, how much have you given? Mm-hmm. How much are you trying to give? Mm-hmm. Because we look at getting something out of it, but we never really look at giving. And actually, it is our faith is a give and take. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what God asks of us. He doesn't ask us to just take. He asks us to give also.
Right.
And so we think about that even at Mass. Your presence at Mass is invaluable. And I'm going to say that again. Your presence at Mass is invaluable. You may not think so, and you may not think that you're given a whole lot by your presence there, but it is because we're a family of faith. So you think about your family for a little while. How important it is when you gather around the table that the whole family's there. I bet you some of you, with your children maybe moved away and maybe your grandchildren moved away, and it's not very often that you all get together and all can gather around the table. How important is that? I bet you Thanksgiving is probably your favorite holiday because it's the one day that all of the family generally can be there, gathered around the table. Well, what is Mass? Think about the table of the Lord there, the priest at the altar, the table, all of us gathered around the table, all of us being nourished with the body and blood of Christ. We can see how important that is to the family of faith. So again, the new evangelization would be to really helping our young people. And when I say young, I'm referring to your generation, those that are 25 and 35 years old, not necessarily just high school or grade school students.
Yeah, and then again, going back to the analogy of, the table like at Thanksgiving, what an opportunity it is for you to, in a sense, regather your family together and to be able to commune together, talk about what's been going on in your life, maybe, you've been having struggles and it's an opportunity to be able to, offer words of advice, words of wisdom, but you come together at that place, think the Mass, you come and you bring your struggle, you come and you bring all that you have in your life, to offer that to God as He offers Himself to you. So it really is a give and a take. So going back to this generation, as a priest, you have a lot of conversations. This generation, so my age, maybe, just out of high school, what do you see as common, issues or common concerns that people have in today's society?
Well, we were talking about secularization earlier. Boy, everyone can understand secularization in a lot of different ways. Okay, so let's say we're at Thanksgiving, and let's say the 15 or 20 of us are gathered around the table, and we love seeing our grandchildren or our children. We love seeing them. How many times have you seen your grandchildren with their cell phones and they're off by themselves and they're like not with the families? I'll bet you there's some out there. I bet you some out there has a rule: no cell phones at the table. During the meal. I'll bet you have the rule of that, so they can't get any phone calls. They're not going to sit there and why? Because they want to engage you. I mean, how enjoyable is it to have a conversation? And I might even say the conversations is so important because I know you've just been married for a little while. There are a lot of young married couples out there that really do not know how to communicate really well with each other.
Right. And
you go, well, why? Well, because they haven't learned or been formed well in how to communicate.
Right.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, their communication has been, watching an iPad or an iPhone or, getting what they want. And they that isn't always possible, number one. And number two, how important it is for them to be able to carry on a conversation. So that's what grandparents do so well. I mean, did you not love to listen to your grandmother tell a story at Thanksgiving about the older days, and they love to continue many of those family stories that you have. Do you not like to go outside and play a game, even though many of us are no good at any of those games, but how much fun is it to get outside and to engage and to really enjoy being with each other? Well, I say let's take that same aspect to the faith life.
Right.
Let's get outside of the Mass and participate in some parish activity that you have. Your parish fun day or your parish picnic. I mean, you go and you just really enjoy each other and help your children, your grandchildren, help the young really kind of enjoy it. If you enjoy it, then you really will understand how important it is, and it'll be meaningful to you in your life. We just went through the pandemic, a couple of years of that. I mean, it taught us so much. It really did teach us how it taught us how important it is that we get together.
Yeah.
And even receive the Eucharist.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have that for several weeks. And how many people really missed receiving the Eucharist?
Yeah. And it's not only, yes, you do get something out of watching Mass online. You can be, in a sense, you can be a part of that celebration, but how much more important, and how much we realize that during COVID, of the physical presence together, not only of the family, obviously gather around the table, but even, in the Mass, in your parish community, all of that plays such an important role. And you talked about, technology, and especially with the younger generation, I can't tell you how often my wife and I, go out to dinner and we see a family and, everybody's looking down at their phone. Nobody's even like acknowledging each other's presence, and that might not be that big of a deal at that one meal, but, think about that over years, over months, that starts to break down communication. And, especially at a table with your whole family, not just mother and father and child, but grandparents, aunts and uncles, you have a real break in that, and you start to get a disconnect. And I think we can see that in the faith. People are not understanding what the faith is, or have never been, presented, a very compelling picture of the faith. And you see that in our society. People don't know, or they think they know what the church might say about something, but it could be what they've heard, but, they haven't even had a conversation with a family member, who knows that. And you see that in, in society now.
Yeah. And we want to offer some practical solutions to people. Okay. And so again, these are some challenges for all of us. And that might be one good challenge, that when you go out to eat, that you have these conversations with your children or grandchildren. You might say, well, tell me about school. How's it going in school? And they always, a lot of times they'll give you one word answers, like it's okay. And then that's no, you have to kind of probe a little further and just, ask them specifically, what's your favorite subject? What are you learning about in religion, whether you go to religion class at a Catholic school or not? They're still learning about their faith. Ask them a little bit about their faith, and just listen to them. Just listen to them. Let them talk. And so there's a lot of good solutions. And I would say challenges to us. I would say tell them that you're praying for them. Let them know that you're praying for them. I would say tell them that you love them. Mm-hmm. You have to use the words "I love you," because they need to know that they're loved by God. And a lot of times they'll see God in others. Mm-hmm. I remember I was chaplain again at the Catholic high school, and I celebrated Mass for students every day, different students every day. And I remember I would finish celebrating Mass, I was cleaning up, at the altar, and I noticed there was just one student left in the church. And so I went down, to kind of say hello, to the one student, and the student was crying. And I was like, "Are you all right?" And she said, "Oh, my teacher told me I could stay here and pray for a little while." And I said, "Well, are you doing good?" And she said, "Well, my grandfather recently died." And I said, I knew that because I knew he had recently died, and we prayed for his family. And she said, "But every time I go in church now, he's all I think about." I said to myself, isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome? This was a high school student who, a lot of times we think that they're not paying attention. They don't know what's going on sometimes, but yet that's what she associated with her grandfather, the deep abiding faith that he had. And so we can take that faith in ourselves and, again, let us grow deeper. Let us grow deeper. Let us grow deeper. And so let's take this opportunity to do that.
So we want to be practical.
Yeah.
So how do we? There's let's just acknowledge there's a lot of ways you can evangelize. There's a lot of ways that you can reach out to not only your family members but friends. Friends of friends. People that you encounter in the grocery store. And how do we, as people of faith, reach out in a meaningful way not in a pushy way, but in a very meaningful and practical way. And I think of 3 ways specifically, and we can talk about those. So number 1 would be catechesis. So we use that word a lot, basically teaching. So first of all, do you know the faith yourself? Do you know how to communicate it effectively? And then do you communicate that effectively to somebody who maybe doesn't know it? And I think that's the first thing. So catechesis, to know the faith. Second would be, like you've been talking about, listening and dialoguing. Do you actually love the person you're talking to? If it's your grandchild, do they know that you love them? Do they know that you genuinely are listening to them? That's maybe more than catechesis. That's probably the most effective in the beginning, because, I can't tell you how often somebody, tells me something, and if it's somebody that I know that doesn't really like me or doesn't trust, or I don't trust them, right over my head, because trust is a huge, huge issue, especially for young people. And then lastly is the importance of family, how important the family is. So we'll start with the first one. So catechesis. So Father, why is teaching the faith, not only yourself and understanding it, but also, getting other people to understand it, so important?
Because you cannot give what you do not have.
Mm-hmm.
It's really that simple. If you want to give, then you have to allow yourself to be well formed, and in particular as it pertains to the faith. I mean, I have answered thousands of questions, and people go, "Wow, I've never really thought about it that way. I've never really heard that before." And I'm sitting there going, "Okay, you should have. You should have." So you growing a little bit deeper in your faith, and it can be some really controversial subjects, but the church has a wealth of teachings out there on the various subjects. And today, the internet's good for a lot of things that aren't so good, but the internet can be really good for some things that are pretty good. So if you are like to read, there's a lot of books on the subject. If you're not a big reader, then there's a lot of audio and visual programs out there that you can learn and grow deeper. And if you just do it slowly, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't pick up the big old book and think you're going to read that book in a week. No, read just a little bit at a time, or listen just a little bit at a time. This is going to be about 30 minutes a week, which is reasonable, and so we're hoping that you'll just learn a little bit, but over a year, think what a difference that makes. It makes an enormous difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it also, talking about, this is all about the parish, so the parish is the place for learning the faith. We have all kinds of events. We do like classes every couple months, where we take a subject and we take an hour and a half and talk about it. You have adult faith formation classes, RCIA. RCIA also is a great place, if you're already Catholic and you maybe want to learn more. Come sit in on a class or two and learn some stuff. Talk to the priest, talk to the director of adult faith formation, and learn about the faith. You have YouTube, obviously, is probably one of the biggest areas. Bishop Barron, of all these different people that have numerous wealth of files on different aspects of the faith. So take it upon yourself to learn the faith a little bit. Catholic Answers, Catholic.com. Literally, it's a search engine. You go on there and you type in a question, and I guarantee they will have an answer for you.
Yeah.
So it's really, especially for young people are definitely searching for the truth. They're hungry, even though you might not think that. They certainly are. They just might angle in different areas. It might be technology that they're seeking for truth. But the church has 2,000 years of history that it has the ultimate truth in Jesus Christ, and we want to present that in a positive way. And I think young people will respond to that, but it has to be presented in a way that is compelling for them, because there's a lot of competing noise coming in from the outside. Catechesis is just so critical.
Important. So again, take advantage of some of the catechetical, and we're going to do a lot of that down throughout the year. We'll do a lot of catechesis, and we'll offer a lot of programs that would be really helpful to you. Dialogue and listening, as Donald Paul mentioned, could be the most important, at least initially, to really get you involved. And I'll think about it a couple of different ways. I used to go to movies a little more, and after a movie, I would go out with whomever I was with, and I would say, well, tell me, what do you think about this aspect of me? What do you think about this act? As a matter of fact, some people got tired of me trying to think of a religious aspect to any movie. And well, that's because that's the way my mind is kind of oriented, and that's the way I'm thinking, and I'm asking them to think a little bit about it. And there's some really good, even the good movies there's out there that they have aspects of the faith incorporated into them, or a TV show. Now I know today families don't sit down together and watch a TV show, but occasionally you might do that. Sit down with your children, your grandchildren, and watch a particular TV show, and then talk about it. Kind of dialogue about it. Maybe you have read a book together, and you said, "Well, Don Paul, what did you get out of this particular book?" And y'all kind of share a little bit of what you got out of it, share a little bit of what I got out of it. We're giving and taking. Mm-hmm. We're listening and we're speaking.
Yeah, and the constant image that keeps coming back to my mind is, that famous scene on the road to Emmaus, where, we have these two disciples that are walking along the road, and Jesus appears to them, and what does he do? He walks with them. He doesn't lead them. He doesn't follow them. He is walking with them together, and they don't even know him. And he's literally explaining, himself to them,
right.
From the Old Testament through what has just occurred, because they're kind of in a desolate place. And, at the end, obviously, he reveals himself to them in breaking the bread, and then he disappears. And I think that's a perfect example of dialoguing and listening. It's getting to know them. It's, walking with them, not, talking at them, but asking good questions, and it's really like that scene shows, it's kind of meeting them where they're at. If you're talking to a high school student, who, maybe doesn't go to Mass, maybe you saying, hey, you need to go to Mass is probably not a good place to start. But what are their interests? What do they like? Why don't you meet them there? Like you were saying, maybe they enjoy the latest movie that just came out. Maybe you should watch the movie and then be able to talk to them about that. And then start kind of, weaving in, oh, what did you think about that? Well, why did you like that? And start asking a little deeper questions, because they want that. They just might not be able to get there themselves. But that's where you can kind of come in and be able to show them the way.
And we're going to try and incorporate the catechism into much of our podcast. We're also going to try and incorporate much of sacred scripture into our podcast. And so immediately what came to mind to me was St. Paul's letter to the Colossians, where it said, "Fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged." So we don't want to nag our children either. I mean, I really do encourage you to tell them that you're praying for them and you love them. And over time, you'll see that really will soften many hearts too. So our last of the three different subjects is having good families. And we'll talk a little bit more about families in future podcasts and how important that is. So let's just talk a little bit how important it is to have a good family. And you had a good family experience. I had a good family experience. Not everyone has. And I think about maybe the single mother that's out there that's mm-hmm. really struggling.
Yep.
And want her to let you know that you're in our prayers. We care about you. We care about your struggles. And we try and make an effort to reach out and help many of those people that are struggling. So the families are still important. And no matter how perfect or imperfect your family may be, it is your family. And you can help be a good part of that family.
Yeah, and it's using the example of the family to teach the faith, I think, is really important. So you have, let's say you're a single mother. So, we feel your struggle and we're here for you. The church is here for you. But you can be the catalyst for your, whether you have one child, whether you have multiple children, whether you don't have any children, you can be a catalyst for, the teaching of the faith, going to Mass, bringing your children to Mass, and, teaching them what it means to be, a good and faithful person. But it's that healthy and, very safe environment of the family that really can bring about, honestly profound, growth in your child's life by just being a loving and caring, husband, a father, whatever your situation is.
And we have to be very sensitive, because it's not everyone's fault that they're a single mother or single father. Sometimes it's factors, what I call factors beyond their control. So we have to be real sensitive. I mean, sometimes it is something that you've done, and you have to be willing to admit that and say, I'm going to be willing to change. But one of the things that I tell many of the people that, are struggling with being a single parent is do everything in your power to help your children not necessarily follow down the road or the path that you follow down. Help them to be the best they possibly can be, so that they can, be a wonderful father, wonderful mother themselves. It is something that you will give to them that will be probably the greatest gift that you can give. I tell many married couples, what's the greatest thing that you can do for your children? What's the greatest thing you can do for your children? To be a good husband, and to be a good wife. That's probably one of the best things you can do for your children. They will pick up on what your interaction with each other, your love for each other, your communication with each other. They just naturally pick that up. I mean, how many times have you maybe said something that you really shouldn't have said, and you heard your child repeat it, and you go, wait a second, where did that come from? They pick up on a lot of what you do. And so that love that you have for each other it's infectious. It is infectious. And so love your wife, love your husband. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you can do for your family.
Yeah. My last thought on that was I was teaching RCIA at my home parish. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and I was teaching on the sacrament of marriage, and the saints that we were kind of modeling that class after were the newer saints, Saints Louis and Zélie Martin. If you don't know them, they are the parents of Saint Therese of Lisieux, and they were canonized together. They're remembered together. Their feast day is together, and I think the church is really offering us an example of the family and the power of the love between a husband and a wife. Not only that it perfected them because they're both saints, but I mean, look at their children. They had, I think, 9 children, and one of them is a saint. She's doctor of the church.
And many of the rest were in the Carmelites.
And one of them now I just saw is actually on the way to canonization herself.
Wow, another one.
So, I think that's just, it shows the power of the family as the domestic church, as the Catechism calls the family. Just how important it can be, for the bringing up of the faith.
I have a relic of St. Therese of Lisieux sitting right outside of the door, and so every time I come out, that's what I look at, and I always ask for her intercession, ask for her prayers. I mean, what a wonderful story. I know that I know many of you have had your children baptized. Don Paul getting ready to have your little baby baptized soon, and the prayer that the priest offers at the baptism over the parents is, you are the first teachers of your child in the ways of faith. May you be the best teachers of your child in the ways of faith. And so through our baptismal call, I'll go back to, we have a duty. We have a duty to carry out that baptismal call. I think this is a good first episode. Certainly hope you enjoyed it. Again, like, subscribe, and review. And you can help us to get more out of this. You can offer different subject matters. We have quite a few subject matters coming up, and occasionally we'll tell you what some of those subjects are, so you can look forward to listening to some of these. Again, they're all on file, so you can go back and watch one or listen to one a little bit later. We'll have a guest on occasionally. Sometimes you'll have just Donald Paul sitting here, and sometimes you'll have just myself, Father Steve Williams, sitting here, and we'll just be able to talk about so many wonderful aspects of our Catholic faith.
Yep. And we just thank you for joining us for this first episode. And just remember that it's important to listen and to dialogue with your family. Obviously, it's important to know the faith, and then just the importance of the family. And we hope that you've gotten a lot out of this episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Saints in the Parish Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share, as well as leave a review as we all seek to become saints in the parish.